Hey ecofictologists, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lovis and today I am delighted to introduce you to John Yunker. Thank you so much for being here, John.
Well, thanks for having me.
John is the author of The Tourist Trail, which I reviewed last week, as well as its sequel, Where the Oceans Hide Their Dead, which I now have.
Ah, nice.
John is also the author of several plays and is the editor for the anthology Writing for Animals and Among Animals. But to top it all off, he is also the co-founder of Ashland Creek Press, which is an independent publishing press focused on publishing literature about the environment and animal rights. And so I'm very, very excited to have a chat with you. First off, I guess we'll start with The Tourist Trail. For the people who missed last week's review or are new to the channel, could you give us a brief, preferably spoiler-free summary of what the book's all about?
Oh gosh. Well, one line. I guess I would say Tourist Trail is about those who risk their lives on the edges of the earth to protect animals. And that specifically includes penguins and whales in this novel.
I fell in love a little bit with Diesel,
Yes.
the penguin.
Yes,
And he's based on a real penguin, right?
yes, he's based on a penguin known as Turbo, and I changed his name to protect his identity. I'm not quite sure why I did that. He is actually, you can Google him. He is still with us. If you go to Penguin Sentinels or Ocean Sentinels is a nonprofit organization. They used to on Facebook have post updates on Turbo, and he's a penguin down there at Punta Tombo. And actually, I'll show you another slide here, a picture. This is actually where the researchers live. There is a penguin there, Turbo, who returns every year with all of them, but he, for some reason, bonded to the researchers. Just follows them along, follows them around when they do their research. He barges his way into their workspace. The act of naming him and also interacting with him on a more personal level, if you will, and then to think, okay, every time Turbo goes off to sea, there's a chance he might not return, and that really it hit me personally, and I wanted to put that in the novel. And it is, I think, the process of naming animals. If I say there's 200,000 penguins, what does that mean? But if you say there's a penguin named Turbo who, if there's a fishing trawler that happens to be passing by when he's out there and he's going to just disappear as bycatch, completely senseless. It really does, I worry about him every year, and I'm always glad to see updates when he returns.
So going back to The Tourist Trail, the Phoebe Journal made a comment about it saying, "The Tourist Trail is at once a romance, an adventure story, an environmental polemic, and a keen study of just how animalistic humans are." Is that what you set out to do with the book, to showcase how animalistic humans are?
Yeah, I do want to connect humans and non-human animals. We are all part of this kingdom, if you will, and it is important to notice, to break down the barriers, so to speak. And these are artificial barriers that have been created often by, science does a little bit of that, I have to say, through the anthropomorphism word, which scientists are often warned against, and I understand why, but I also think there are dangers to not. Well, there's a line I've said again and again. It's in the introduction to, I think, Among Animals. It's the more we study animals, the smarter they get. What if we just assume that animals were brilliant and then worked down from there, as opposed to what we have historically done is worked from this idea of animals as machines, as non-thinking, non-feeling robots. And now every year it seems they get smarter, they get more emotional, they get more like us. Mm-hmm. I think science is doing a great job in at least documenting that and showing that. But I think fiction, I know fiction can do a great job of just cutting through all of that. And because we're not bound by any scientific limitations. So anthropomorphism, I don't care. I'm going to dive right in.
And the book is published by Ashland Creek Press, which you helped to found. So let's talk a little bit about the publishing house. On the Ashland Creek website, the answer to the question, why should I submit to Ashland Creek Press, mentions that the traditional publishing is undergoing so many changes and doors are closing. Would you expand a little bit on what some of those areas are that are closed?
Well, the publishing industry is definitely going through changes. What I learned when I wrote The Tourist Trail, I had an agent and she tried to sell it and she took it to all the publishing houses. And this novel is, eco literature. If you go into a bookstore and ask for the ecofiction section, there is no ecofiction section, right? Nope. So it's a more challenging book to market. It certainly was 10 years ago. I think now it's slightly easier to market, but that was that experience. I first self-published The Tourist Trail because I have a background in publishing, and Midge, my partner, does as well. So we said, well, let's do it ourselves. And then we realized, there's probably some other writers out there having similar challenges. And, Ashland Creek Press came about. It's a labor of love. We work from home. We don't publish too many books, but because we're also writing our own work, and we view our press as both a publishing house, but also a work of activism in itself, because we are trying to say our view for environmentalism is important, and we call it new environmentalism, if you will. We don't believe in hunting and fishing, and those historically have fallen under the umbrella of environmental literature, but we don't subscribe to that. So we're a little more progressive in that regard. And of course we're vegans, so we don't, that's a whole nother element that we're very passionate about. And so it's been quite a journey, and it's a growing field too. I'm very pleased to see there's a lot more people nowadays of all ages waking up and saying, we need to do something. Obviously, here in Oregon with the fires and California, the whole West Coast, climate change is absolutely real, and we can all as individuals do things. And we remain very optimistic that if we all collectively do our part, and a lot of different ways, we can make a difference. And that's all it's about. We can't necessarily snap our fingers or ask for the government to do something. The government is doing very little right now, but we can do something, and that's what we're all about.
Even though the description of what Ashland Creek Press publishes might sound quite restrictive to some if you're talking about just environmental literature, you actually publish a wide range of books, fiction and nonfiction. What do you think fiction brings to environmental literature that nonfiction doesn't? Does it access a different audience, or create a different experience?
Yes and yes. It often accesses a different audience through. It's particularly if you focus on genre. We have a YA trilogy that has a vegan message, but it's a vegan vampire trilogy, if you will.
Oh,
people that are into vampires have discovered it's a young adult trilogy, although it cuts all the way up to adults, and it's a great series. It's set in Oregon, and so if there's a lot of people who are just like vampire novels and vampire trilogies, and they read that and they get a little bit of the environmental message, and but it fits under that genre. We do YA, we have thrillers, we have more serious fiction. But yeah, I think I say ecofiction is fiction with a conscience, so to speak. I do think there is a message, there is a point of view, and we do have to be careful as writers. And that criticism I've heard for my work is some readers just don't want to be preached to, and I understand that. But I do think you can tell a good story and deliver that message at the same time, where people don't realize they're being preached to per se. Because, you know, if you don't have anything to say as a writer, you probably shouldn't be a writer. You know, every writer is saying something, is preaching something. They may not be preaching. The challenge is if you're preaching something the reader doesn't want to hear. That's the issue. That's when you get accused of preaching. If the reader wants to hear what you're preaching, then that's not an issue. So the challenge for what we're writing is, how do you reach across to people who may be inherently opposed to what you're writing about? And I know with the tourist trail, I have been surprised. A lot of people that are not politically aligned with my views, not vegan. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from the novel, and they say, you know, I eat fish. I'm rethinking that. I'm rethinking eating fish.
Wow.
They may not be vegan. They don't care about that, but they're if I can just reach them a little bit, you know, just kind of break through a little bit through a good story, you know, and ultimately it comes down to the characters. Are these characters people that the reader can relate to? And when I talk to writers, one thing I say is you have to, I talk a lot about empathy. You have to be empathetic to people that you disagree with and disagree with you. And my goal as a writer is to create characters that are not perfect, that are flawed, that are like all of us, and that hopefully the readers can connect with them. And it's this movement is not about being perfect. I cringe a little bit when there are purity tests and so forth about environmentalism, because I feel like doesn't do a good thing for the movement. I think everyone can do something and should do something, but to ask everyone to be perfect is probably a little too much, because I'm not perfect and I don't think I'll ever be perfect. The most effective fiction are those where you create characters that the characters themselves, the message might not resonate globally with everyone, but the characters can resonate. And I think that's how you can reach people where nonfiction cannot.
Absolutely. And what you said there, it's fiction is reading with a conscience, right? And on your website, I just love it. It's across it says read like you give a damn. And you see that written across the Ecolit site, which is where people can go to buy books such as The Tourist Trail and everything else that the Ashland Creek Press publishes, correct? It's an independent online journal that's dedicated to books on environmental and animal protection. What motivated the creation of the blog?
It's a blog. It's a literary. It's an online community, a journal. It's for writers and readers. And I think we started it. You know, we generally start things because we go, why isn't there such and such out there? Mm-hmm. And then instead of complaining about it, create it. And we did. Because we believe in not just promoting our own work, which we do through the Ecolit, but we also promote all presses, any writers who are focused on these issues. So if we're passionate about a book, we'll review the book. And we have about 5 or 6 contributors focused on different types of books, poetry or children's literature, and they just contribute as they read books that speak to them. And then we also list writing opportunities. So we have a long list of literary outlets for environmental writing about environmental topics. It can be fiction, nonfiction, etc. That was something that I wanted as well, because I submit as a writer. I write short stories and plays, and I'm always wondering, you know, I always want just one spot that I can go to look for all the journals, and so now I have it.
Yeah,
and it's quite popular, actually.
I've just got actually one more question for you, and I just thought I'd ask you for a couple of recommendations. Obviously, I can highly recommend The Tourist Trail, and even though I've not read it, the Where the Oceans Hide Their Dead, I'm sure that's wonderful as well. But I just wondered what's caught your attention recently.
Well, it's going to sound highly biased, but I would recommend Midge Raymond's novel, My Last Continent. You know, that trip that Midge and I took inspired 2 novels, mine and hers. And hers was published by a big press, by Simon & Schuster. And it's an amazing novel. And it's not a spoiler to say that there's a shipwreck in Antarctica, but it's an amazing novel. And it definitely is up there with me. What have I, the classics, I'm trying to think of books that I've read again and again. Moby Dick, even though that's a brutal novel to read and tedious at times, I really admire, I will always admire what he was trying to do. And I do believe it's an environmental novel. And I actually believe it's an anti-whaling novel. I don't believe he was glorifying whaling so much as struggling with the practice of it. And because it is a gory, horrible practice. I know you've heard of, I don't know if this will show up, but The Overstory.
Oh, The Overstory.
Richard Powers. And this one I actually like for Annie Proulx, Barkskins, also about trees, if you will, the history. It's an epic, truly epic novel. And it's a great novel. And, there's a lot going on right now. A lot of these excellent writers now are really starting to devote their energy towards environmental destruction and also the battles being waged. Richard Powers talks about the tree sitters, and a lot of what he's writing actually happened here in Oregon and Northern California and continues even now. So this battle is not historical, it is contemporary.
Yeah. Okay, well, that about wraps us up in terms of what I wanted to ask you. I will, of course, be leaving links to everything that you've mentioned and everything we've talked about, EcoLit, as well as Ashland Creek Press, of course, in the description below, so everybody can find you and find where to buy all of your books. So all that's left is for me to thank you so much for joining me on the channel and for taking the time to talk to me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So that's it from me, and I'll see you next week, ecofictologists.